schemes. Darren McBreen breaks this down, talking about the so-called 2030 apocalypse. It's really about the 2020 election.
To a dire warning about climate change.
A dire warning.
A dire warning.
A dire warning.
Dire new warning. Dire warning.
Another dire warning. The situation is dire.
A dire warning.
Dire consequences.
A dire warning.
It sounds dire. What prompted this warning?
We have a global emergency.
It's here, it's man-made, and there are going to be dire results.
The government issued its most dramatic report yet about climate change today, and it came with a dire warning.
A stark warning.
A warning to humanity.
An existential threat to human civilization on this planet.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
And we, the scientists also tell us, have 12 years in which to answer that question. 12 years within which to act.
The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change.
We have 12 years to turn this around.
By the year 2030, that's just 12 years from now.
The future is closer than we think and is not good.
There will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Time is running out to prevent global warming from reaching a catastrophic milestone.
Sea levels rising.
Extreme drought.
Severe storms.
Widespread fires and extreme flooding.
Dangerous heat waves. Rising sea levels
and forcing millions from their homes.
Crop failure and mass population movement.
As well as food shortages.
Millions around the world face future.
Yeah, it is an echo chamber of fear. We're going to be right back. That's a great clip that was put together by Darren McBreen. You can see more of that at Infowars.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back as we're talking about this New York mandatory vaccine. That's what it really is. Says the order says, I also find that the presence of any person in Williamsburg lacking the MMR vaccine, unless that vaccine is otherwise medically contraindicated or such person has demonstrated immunity against measles. And then further on, it repeats all this. This order signed by me, everyone shall be vaccinated against measles unless such a person can demonstrate immunity. How do you demonstrate immunity to the satisfaction of de Blasio and his commissar of health? Let's just call this person the czar of health. Somebody, I think their name is pronounced Osiris Barbeau, MD. Oxiris, Barbeau. Osiris? I don't know. Anyway, that's the commissar there, issuing their mandates. And even Governor Cuomo said, I don't think this is going to really stand up to any legal challenges. You're going to override people's religious beliefs. You're going to say that your child has a right somehow to a germ-free environment, and you're going to get that by vaccinating people? How do you demonstrate immunity to somebody? You know, you're going to have this vaccine, or you're going to have to demonstrate immunity to me. What are they going to do? They're going to have somebody with measles going around and say, hold them up to you and then quarantine you for a while so you can demonstrate your immunity? Of course not. The only way you can demonstrate your immunity is to show them that you've gotten your shot. That's what this is all about. It's just de Blasio seeking financial sponsors. And he might be able to pick them up. You know, ratings have fallen so much for CNN and MSNBC that the big pharmaceutical companies can only spend so much money subsidizing Fox News. Maybe he can pick up some of those people who are saying, well, you know, we're really not getting any viewership on CNN. They're about to fall out of the top 20. Maybe they already have fallen out of the top 20. So maybe, you know, he can pick up some money from them. He's desperate. He's going around Iowa trying to get support, de Blasio is. Talking to, in one case, a group of 7 people. So he's desperate. That's really what's behind this. As Governor Cuomo said, who's not running for president, he said, do we have the right, does society, government have the right to say you got to vaccinate your child because I'm afraid your child's going to infect my child? Even if you don't want it done? Even if it violates your religious beliefs? No. And then the other part of this is, how do I demonstrate? You demonstrate to me, de Blasio and Osiris Barbeau, Dr. Barbeau, you demonstrate to me that MMR conveys immunity. You demonstrate that to me when you've got patient 0. Every week we got somebody who's, just last week, we had a teacher in California expose the kids. She had been vaccinated, substitute teacher. So when we look at this bill that's been introduced in Austin, Texas, because it's not just the FDA commissioner, you've also got Senator Pan a physician shill for the pharmaceutical industry in California. He pushed mandatory vaccines in California, got that ball rolling. And now he's writing letters to the FDA saying, we need to do this on a national basis. And so because he's pushing that, we got, fortunately, Bob Hall here in Texas a month ago put in a bill, said, all right, you show me the study, you show me the placebo study that says that this was effective. And then in that study, I want you to conduct that study looking for side effects, adverse side effects. I want you to do it for at least a year. And then the side effects that you find, because you're probably going to find some, pretty much every vaccine or every drug that's put out has a long list of side effects. There's nothing in this life that doesn't have risk. It's not just getting a harmless childhood disease that has risk. Yes, you can have serious consequences. 1 out of 10,000 people have serious consequences from measles. But it is one of the least risky diseases out there. That's what's so amazing about this panic. One of the least risky diseases, but one of the most profitable ones for the big pharmaceutical companies. Oh, think about that. Put that on the scale and weigh that. And so he says, so after you do this study, looking to see whether it's effective, after you do the study for a year, looking to see if it's got harmful side effects, then you're going to put it on the Texas Department of State Health Services, what you find in terms of negative side effects. And then you're going to have the chemical, pharmacological, therapeutic, and adverse effects of the vaccine and the rate of injury of the vaccine when administered in combination with other vaccines. That's going to be studied as well and verified. And that's very important because these things are always administered in combination. If you look at any drug that you're taking, when I got drugs prescribed for me after I had a heart attack, you go to the different drug sites and you can give them the different drugs that they look for adverse reactions that come up as a combination of drugs that you're taking because they act differently in combination than they do individually. So you might take one drug and you might not have a reaction, but if you take it in combination with something else, that other thing might completely cancel out the effects of that drug, or it might intensify the effects and make it very harmful. So the combination of vaccines is very significant. First, do no harm. Secondly, make sure that it is studied for adverse effects. Make sure that the adverse effects, when done in combination with other vaccines and other drugs, are studied. And then honestly list these effects for people and the risk rate for people. We look at this, go back to 1986, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program that you don't know about, the vaccine court, that gave immunity to big pharmaceutical companies, legal immunity. We have a legal system because if they produce something that is dangerous, presumably the lawsuits will stop them from continuing to do this. That's why we have the lawsuits. That's why we have big judgments. But these people can profit from this, and they don't have to suffer any adverse effects. So that might be why, in 1983, the CDC recommended 23 doses of 7 vaccines. Now, they're recommending 69 doses of 16 vaccines, starting on the day of birth, when the kids don't really have the ability they don't have a mature enough immune system to really process this effectively. 50 doses of 14 vaccines given before the age of 6 for most people. The FDA has chosen to classify the vaccines as biologics rather than drugs because drugs are required to undergo multi-year double-blind placebo studies. Exactly what Bob Hall said to do to vaccines here in Texas, but they don't do that. See, this is one of these deals, we see this over and over again. It's called regulatory capture, or if you want, corruption, where the regulatory agencies really work for and with the industry that they're supposedly regulating. The CDC that is recommending all these schedules is the biggest reseller of vaccines. They're profiting from this, just like the mainstream media is profiting from this. And when Associated Press put out the articles talking about people reacting to not wanting to take their vaccines as demanded by the pharmaceutical industry and their puppets in government, they said, well, you got these people like InfoWars out there. And they're putting out false information about risks. No, everything has risks involved with it. Everything. And they said, and they sell health supplements. It's like, yeah. And they got a profit. Oh, you want to tell me that we're not doing that for profit? I don't make any money. Nobody here at InfoWars makes any money by you not taking vaccines. We're not selling an alternative to vaccines. We're selling information about how to take care of your health. And we're telling you information about what the possible side effects are out there because the CDC won't do its job. The FDA won't do its job. The mainstream media won't do its job. And nowhere do you see anybody questioning the profits of the CDC, questioning the profits of the pharmaceutical industry, questioning the profits of the mainstream media pushing this. Vaccines contain a myriad of toxic, concerning substances such as aluminum, antibiotics, formaldehyde, polysorbate 80, bovine extract, aborted human fetal tissues, reports Free Thought Project. Yeah, it's absolutely. Read the label. Know the risks. Make your decision. Everything has risks in life. You know, you can kill yourself if you drink too much water, right? And I'm not even talking about drowning. Anyway, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You know, the government really is wise and compassionate and has your best interests at heart, doesn't it? And all of these vaccine mandates and so forth that we're looking at. Just take a look at these cancer patients in Minnesota. They're finally starting to do some studies here with this stuff. We've had a lot of anecdotal evidence that they completely dismissed. They said, well, we're not going to listen to those people who said that medical marijuana helped them. We're not going to listen to that. We don't have any studies. And we're not going to fund any studies. So shut up. Just like they're not going to fund any studies to look at the adverse effects of vaccines. No, as a matter of fact, what they'll do is socialize those risks. They'll compensate people a little bit if you're harmed for life. If you die from the vaccines, they'll give you money, and they are doing that to a small degree, but they are not going to have that paid by the people who are profiting from it. That money's not going to come out of the pocket of the CDC. It's not going to come out of the big pharmaceutical companies that are making so much money with a liability-free drug that has never had any testing, unlike every other drug that the FDA comes out with. But and still, a lot of stuff slips through the case. But now they're starting to do some tests of how medical marijuana works. This is the Minnesota Department of Health announced Monday the findings of a 2-year study involving 1,120 cancer patients enrolled in the state's medical marijuana program. This is reported by CBS, mainstream media. It's now, look, folks, it's now safe to say that marijuana works medically. You had John Boehner, who for all these years said, I'm unalterably opposed, until he found a way to make tons of money. Now, as I search through different news sites, I occasionally get a pop-up commercial wanting me to click on a presentation from John Boehner about how I, too, can make money out of medical marijuana like John Boehner is doing. Except he got there first. He's making all the money, and I am down the chain of suckers that he's trying to rip off for money. This guy who kept something that he now is pushing very, very hard for money, kept it away from people for a very long time. As a matter of fact, John Boehner and people like Kamala Harris locking people up in jail for very long mandatory sentences for decades for this kind of stuff, ruining people's lives, confiscating their homes, their cars, their cash. This is their kids. I just last week, I talked to a man who was involved in a 3-year fight to get his kids back from CPS. Why? Because he had the audacity to use medical marijuana. And they found out about it because he was a veteran. And the drugs that they were giving him at the VA were not helping him, but the medical marijuana was. And so they used that as a pretense to steal his kids without due process, just like they will steal your physical possessions, your home, your car, your cash, without any due process. But now they've found a way to make money. And just like that, overnight, you got John Boehner and the rest of these criminals flipping sides on this. So I'm glad they're doing some studies. I'm glad they're finally telling the truth to some people about this. They said they found the patients reported a, quote, significant reduction in the severity of symptoms in the first 4 months of cannabis treatment. The symptoms that they tracked were things like anxiety, lack of appetite, nausea, pain, vomiting. It says, as a matter of fact, one of the symptoms to see the biggest decline was vomiting. And let me tell you, as somebody who had absolutely no interest in recreational marijuana, never taken it, I got into this issue. It was a book that was written by a gay libertarian, Peter McWilliams, who in the early days of HIV contracted that. He was taking chemotherapy drugs like they give to cancer patients. Peter McWilliams was also an open advocate of how effective this was for controlling things like nausea and vomiting that were caused by the chemotherapy that he was taking. And he was open about it. And so the judge in California decided that he would punish him for that. He wrote a book called Ain't Nobody's Business If You Do, or something like that. And the judge said, you're not going to take any medical marijuana. He said, well, that's the only thing that keeps me from vomiting constantly. So the judge says, well, because you disobey my orders, I will lock you in jail to make sure that you don't take medical marijuana. And, you know, Peter McWilliams choked to death on his own vomit in jail because the judge wanted to prove a point about marijuana prohibition. That got my attention. It should get your attention. You should understand that the government is lying to you about these health issues. They have monetary motivations. They have political power motivations. They want to control your lives, and they want to reward their friends who are selling you products. And when their friends decide that they can make money selling you marijuana, then all of a sudden they'll just do a quick 180, as we're seeing right now, and say, well, like, this is great now. You know, it was always something we were going to punish you, ruin your life, ruin your family's life, kill you perhaps, to enforce this. They had no respect and still don't have any respect for your health. So you better do your own research. Anything that you take, do your own research. Look at those symptoms. And like I said, you know, we look at the symptoms that were there for the drug my wife was taking after her hip surgery, gabapentin. A lot of people don't have any problem with gabapentin. A lot of people do. And you better believe that if you look at these different symptoms, double vision, dizziness, all these other, I mean, down the line, I mean, she had so many different symptoms all at once. She only took it for 5 days. In that amount of time, she couldn't do a puzzle anymore. It affected her mentally. She couldn't watch television. She get double vision. She eventually passed out. That's when we said, all right, that's it. We're stopping. Everybody says, don't go cold turkey on this stuff. It's pretty toxic. It's like, it's only been 5 days. We're going to go to cold turkey. It took her about 48 hours to get that crap out of her system. It's poison. But it's very profitable for the pharmaceutical companies. And so this article from The Hill, how Trump could use pot legalization to take away an advantage that the Democrats have. And as they point out, you got Nancy Pelosi, unable to control a fractured, unruly Democrat caucus. The party's presidential contenders are doubling down on divisive identity politics and harebrained socialist economic proposals. And so Republican strategists are patting themselves on the back and say, yeah, we got this one. But people are looking at what's going on with marijuana. And you've got Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, that are trying to build up the gains that they made because of the stupid policies of Jeff Sessions, that idiot at the Justice Department, who has absolutely no idea what he's trying to regulate and doesn't care. Just like, I say so, that's the law, you better do it. Of course, he doesn't use that same standard with the Democrats in high places in government that were pulling every underhanded trick in the book to try to get President Trump out. Now, when William Barr went to the Senate confirmation hearings, he made it clear that these moves against pot legalization are not going to happen anymore. Good for him. However, President Trump could really take this issue away from the Democrats if he would be the one to just not sit there and let them take the initiative to do the right thing. President Trump could take this and use it for political gain, quite frankly, and he ought to. You know, they don't care about our lives, but they do care about political power. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I just said that Attorney General Barr said in his confirmation hearings that he is not going to pursue the unconstitutional, wrong-headed policies of Jeff Sessions to try to overturn legalization of marijuana, medical and otherwise, that have been done by the states. Of course, we have a 10th Amendment. And there is a political advantage now, an economic advantage to getting on the side of marijuana for these politicians. Yeah, it is an issue that if President Trump is smart, he's going to take the lead and not just be neutral about this. But it's good that Sessions, who was opposed to it, is finally gone. How in the world can the chief attorney of this country, and we've had a whole string of them because we've had the war on drugs going for nearly 50 years, how can anybody look at the history of this country, look at the Constitution, look at the 18th and the 21st Amendment? 18th Amendment said we're going to prohibit alcohol. Why did they need that? Why did they go to that? That's a lot of trouble to put a constitutional amendment in. That's a lot of trouble. You got to have 2/3 of both houses. You got to have 3/4 of the states ratify it. That's a lot of trouble to go through when you can just prohibit anything that you want, right? Well, that's where we are today because we've got people who don't care about the Constitution running this government. These unfaithful oath breakers who take an oath to the Constitution, use it for their authority, and then completely ignore what it has to say. No, they had to have that amendment because we have the 9th and 10th Amendment that says you don't have the power to do this. And if we don't give you any specific powers, those powers are retained by the states and by the people. And the states and the people and referenda, as well as state legislatures, passed laws saying we're going to legalize marijuana, even though the United Nations said no. That's where the war on drugs came from. Yeah, it was signed by that UN shill, Richard Nixon, the same guy who put China in power, of course, with Henry Kissinger. I'm absolutely amazed. You know, we see all of these articles, and I've talked many times about the American Legislative Exchange Council and other groups, equivalent groups for the Democrats. ALEC predominantly works with the GOP, and I've talked many times on this program and while I've been here at InfoWars about how you have these conventions that are run by the American Legislative Exchange Council, and they have all the legislators from the state legislature go to these vacation resorts, and they wine and they dine them, and then the business interests have a piece of legislation, and they just hand it to these guys and say, here's your homework, take this back to your state, put the name of the state at the top, sign it at the bottom, and turn it in for us, and we'll make sure the rest of this happens. Well, that's the way we got the war on drugs, except it was done that way by the United Nations. They came up with a schedule 10 years before Richard Nixon said, I've got an idea. Let's have a war on drugs. I've got an idea. Let's have 4 schedules, and we'll put all the different drugs in different schedules. We'll put marijuana in there as number 1, and we'll lock the majority of people up for having and using marijuana. Well, that all came from the United Nations. And he was just putting the United States at the top of that list, put it at the top of that piece of legislation from the UN, and then signed it at the bottom and turned in his homework, and they made sure the rest of this happened. And now, after 50 years, we have seen what's happened. We have a massive, violent, real war taking place in Mexico. We've seen the number of people using and addicted to drugs soaring in spite of all this. We've seen the corruption of law enforcement. We've seen the corruption of the legal system. We've seen a massive expansion in prison for profit. All of this is a consequence. So it's time for President Trump to get not just neutral, but also to get out ahead of this. But it's good. It's a good sign to see that Attorney General William Barr is doing that. I had a lot of concerns with William Barr having been the Attorney General for George H.W. Bush. I was like, oh, no, here we go again. So far, he's been good, and he was good yesterday when he talked to Congress. As John Solomon at the Hill said, there was a single sentence that came across there that is a bombshell, as he was talking to Democrats yesterday. Attorney General William Barr showed us Tuesday, writes John Solomon, in his first testimony since the end of the Russia probe, and he wrapped that up finally, something that, of course, Jeff Sessions could never do. Weak Jeff. That he's not big on emotion, animation, flashy presentations, but he's calm, scholarly, precise, even as the Democrats tried to lob a bomb or two his way. But the even-keeled nature of his 2-hour-plus performance shouldn't blind us to one momentous declaration that he made to the lawmakers. Here's what Attorney General Barr said yesterday. Run that clip.
The Justice Department investigating how it came to be that your agency used a salacious and unverified dossier as a predicate for a FISA order on a U.S. citizen?
The Office of the Inspector General has a pending investigation of the FISA process in the Russian investigation, and I expect that that will be complete probably in May or June, I am told. So hopefully we'll have some answers from Inspector General Horowitz on the issue of the FISA warrants. Go ahead. More generally, I am reviewing the conduct of the investigation and trying to get my arms around all the aspects of the counterintelligence investigation that was conducted during the summer of 2016.
Are you investigating who leaked the existence of the FISA order against Carter Page?
Who what?
Are you investigating who leaked the existence of a FISA order against Carter Page?
I haven't seen the referrals yet from Congressman Nunez, but obviously if there's a predicate for an investigation, it'll be conducted.
Thank you.
Boy, there was a lot of stuff in there. Let's unpack that. First of all, he says, well, you're going to look into how this whole thing started? In other words, are you going to investigate the instigators? Oh, yeah. He mentions twice the FISA process. We're going to look into that FISA process. The Office of Inspector General is looking into that process. He'll have his report about those FISA warrants. That's where it all began. And then, of course, as he is being questioned by the congressman from Alabama, Alderholt, he followed up with that, and Barr continued. He said, but more generally, I'm not just looking at how this was instigated. I'm looking, he said, at the way the investigation was conducted. So he's going to investigate the instigators and how they lied about this, the circular process. We've talked about this many times. Circular process about how they got the FISA warrant. These CIA shills, John Brennan's probably going to be at the center of this. These CIA shills working with the Walrus in London, working with the British intelligence agencies, conspiring with foreign intelligence agencies to try to overthrow our elections, manufacturing this fake dossier, leaking information to the press, then using those press reports to go before the FISA court and say, oh, we got something here, and, that's circular logic and so forth. So, yeah, that, but also how the whole thing was run. He says, more generally, I'm reviewing the conduct of the investigation, trying to get my arms around all the aspects of the counterintelligence investigation. So he's talking about the FISA process, how this was instigated. He's talking about how this was run. He knows that it's coming out of the COINTELPRO stuff. Very encouraging to hear these statements. And Jim Jordan, who knows exactly what's going on here, said, I think this is huge. We've always wanted someone with authority to go back and see how this started and whether it was done by the rules. And now we have the chance. Absolutely. And when he talked about the different things that criteria that he used for redacting the Mueller report when asked by a Democrat, he said, well, first thing is grand jury information. Second thing that we redacted is information that the intelligence community believes would reveal intelligence sources and methods. The third are information in the report that could interfere with ongoing prosecutions. Ongoing prosecutions. He said, you'll recall that the special counsel did spin off a number of cases that are still being pursued. Maybe he's going to add to that. Let's hope so. He even referenced the fact that he's going to be looking into the people that were referred to him by Devin Nunes. And they said, finally, we intend to redact information that implicated the privacy or reputational interest of peripheral players where they are not going to be charged. So in other words, we're not going to use this to slander people. That's the way the Democrats and Adam Schiff and others were using it. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We got China's largest newspaper admitted that they are helping the government to censor the internet. Kind of like the Washington Post and New York Times, CNN. We're helping you to censor free speech here. Now, I don't know. That hasn't worked out too well for CNN. Maybe it's worked out pretty good for Washington Post and these other people. But CNN really wasn't hurt by their censorship efforts, unfortunately. I think they were hurt by the fact that their lies about President Trump were exposed. Maybe it was good for them because it's been good for the People's Daily. They've built themselves among the most influential and authoritative newspapers in China. And, of course, they are the official mouthpiece of the Communist Chinese Party, the Chinese Communist Party. And any big business is going to be linked in with the Communist Party in China. But as a result of that, on the Shanghai stock market, its shares have been soaring. So it's like, oh, great. They're working. They're collaborators, co-conspirators with the government. They're government shills. And so we got this weird combination of capitalism and Stasi police state there in China. And so if you come out and say, I'm part of the Stasi police state attacking free speech, all right, good, they're insiders. Let's buy their stock because we know they're not going to go out of business, right? That's good for business. And it's good for business here in America as well. Folks, if you want to help us here at InfoWars, we're standing pretty much alone against this. We're not getting any help from anyone in government to shut down this corporate government partnership for censorship here in America. Here, they're not so open about it. In China, they brag about it because it's good for their stock to be seen as part of the establishment. Here, they have to pretend that they're honoring the First Amendment. Here, they have to say, well, it's a private company. A private company can do anything that they want. They can gag and silence anybody. We've got reports that have surfaced, more documents that have been released about Google, talking about how they go in and identify individuals or news organizations. They blacklist those organizations for search results. We've been telling you this for a long time. We've shown you evidence of that. And if you weren't paying attention to those reports, you could see it when it happened to us on social media, but it happens with Google as well. Alex has talked about how they've purged any news articles, even when there's a lot of articles from big mainstream media. If it's something negative, they'll put it up. If it's anything positive, they'll cut it out of there. Or now they've gotten to the point where they just cut Alex out completely at Google. So you got to go to another search engine to find out any reports from InfoWars or so forth. But folks, you are our sponsor. And we're going to find another way around this. There are other organizations that are going to be there. I saw a very positive indicator today, PewDiePie, who's been the biggest star on YouTube, if you will, most number of views. He has now been attacked by YouTube. They're putting some shadow banning on him. He sees the handwriting on the wall. He's now moved to another platform. If President Trump would move away from Twitter, they'd move to Gab or something. It'd be overnight. You could eviscerate these people. So it's going to take that type of thing. But in the meantime, folks, we need your support. You have been our sponsor over the years. We really do appreciate your support. And in response to that, last week we had our 50-hour broadcast to preserve the free press, to preserve your free speech rights. And as part of that, we cut all the prices of the InfoWars Life products by 50%. Free shipping store-wide. We have double the Patriot points. You get a 10% discount on future purchases right now. In addition to the free shipping, in addition to the 50% off. And some of the products are 55% off. Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine, backed by popular demand. That's 55% off. 60% off products like DNA Force Plus. That is a big dollar savings. Brain Force, 60% off. Many other products. Bod Ease, our all-natural anti-inflammatory ingredient. Turmeric is natural. It's a spice. It is very effective, however, at fighting inflammation. That's one of the key ingredients in Bod Ease. Good form of turmeric in combination with other natural ingredients that will help it to be absorbed and utilized by the body to help fight joint inflammation or other forms of inflammation. Safe and effective, and now 60% off Bod Ease. Take a look at the products we have at InfoWarsStore.com. All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Secret Service. We have had a couple of things that are very interesting in the last couple of days from the Secret Service. Of course, what happened at Mar-a-Lago was kind of interesting, wasn't it? Talk about incompetence there in the Secret Service. You've got this Chinese spy, and she's got all kinds of electronic equipment and everything. The guy who apprehends her takes the thumb drive and plugs it into his device, and everybody's saying, have you had any basic training in the most fundamental aspects of malware or anything? Obviously not. And some people say, well, okay, it wasn't connected to anything, so nothing was compromised. This guy admitted that he didn't have a video recording because he couldn't figure out how to operate that equipment either. So I'm not quite so sure that he understands what's going on with the computer side of things. If he can't figure out how to do an audio-video recording, of his examination of this woman. But it looks like, perhaps, that it wasn't for that incompetence. It wasn't for the incompetence and the slow walking of an investigation into a woman. Remember, right as President Trump became president, there was a senior Secret Service agent, a woman, who posted Facebook condemnations of President Trump. She bragged about how she would not take a bullet for him. And that was going back to January of 2017. They've slow-walked this investigation. They haven't really done anything to her. That's indicative of what's going on with the Secret Service. It's not even just President Trump. You know, it goes back to the people under Obama, you know, people jumping over the fence. Many times this has happened. There are some real issues inside the Secret Service besides how they handled the Mar-a-Lago incident. You could look at this and say, well, you know, the Democrats had, and the establishment Republicans had a plan to remove President Trump by these dirty tricks, the coup that they tried to pull out with the intelligence agencies. That hasn't worked now. That's been shut down. So maybe they're going to go to a plan B, you know, assassination attempt. Is that why President Trump is cleaning house at the Secret Service? Or is it just the accumulated effect of incompetence there? I don't know. But they are cleaning house there. Secret Service director and many other top Homeland Security officials were leaving, reports CBS News yesterday. They said, besides U.S. Secret Service Director Randolph Tex Ailes being fired, there's also U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Lee Cisna, DHS Undersecretary for Management Grady, DHS General Counsel John Mitnick also leaving the administration. And the official departures are part of a system-wide purge, reports CBS, of senior management at Department of Homeland Security as top Trump advisor Stephen Miller looks to overhaul immigration-related policy and personnel. And so most of these were part of immigration, except for the Secret Service issue. And they're saying this notification came out prior to the most recent issue at Mar-a-Lago. So they're pouring cold water on the idea this had anything to do with what happened there and the incompetence that we saw that was systemic throughout the Secret Service. This guy, unfortunately, is not completely gone. He has now been moved to another department. Tex is moved to another department. But Mitt Romney is out there saying, oh, this is dangerous. It's a very dangerous situation concerning what's happening at the border. It's dangerous given the broad responsibilities of Department of Homeland Security for protecting our nation to have a vacuum now at the top of DHS. No, it's really good. I'm glad to see that Stephen Miller is the one in charge of this. He's one of the guys that's on board with the issues that President Trump has run on. And if he's getting rid of these people who have turned the border into an unmitigated disaster, yeah, we got a vacuum at the border, Mitt. Actually, it's a magnet pulling people across. But there's a vacuum where there's no wall at all. You know, we got that giant sucking sound. First, it sucked the jobs out of America, as Ross Perot said, with NAFTA. And now we're sucking people in, offering them jobs, offering them free welfare services. We need to stop that. You know, I want to look at these policies, and we're going to take a look at what's happening at the border when we come back. I'm really concerned. Even with conservative immigration groups, they just don't get it. They don't get how we are incentivizing this. And when we look at the proposals that they're coming up with, they're totally clueless as to how these foreign citizens are being used as part of the census to create political power base for the Democrats, regardless of whether they actually let them vote. They can still get the power from them by using the census. And these conservative measures that they're coming up with, quote unquote conservative measures, are simply there to protect business interests. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Yeah, let's talk about some of those clowns on the left and on the right. We're going to take a look at some of the policy proposals at the border. Some of them good, some of them not good. We're not going to sign off on everything just because it came up from a conservative group that really does have America's interests at heart. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm just saying that some of their policies are good, some aren't. Some of President Trump's policies are good and some aren't. I'm not saying that he's doesn't have our interest at heart, but I think that he needs to fine-tune what he's doing. And hopefully these personnel changes that we're seeing are going to matter because personnel is policy. That's the old axiom. And he's had people in his administration from the very beginning that were not on board with what he ran on, not on board with what we voted for. And they have opposed him, and they have essentially blocked any progress on a lot of key issues, existential issues, issues that will affect the continued existence of America as we know it. If we don't fix these issues, folks, this is a bigger deal than losing an election and not having President Trump reelected. It's a much bigger deal than that. And so it's very important now that we see we've got Jeff Sessions out, we've got Barr in, and so far Barr has been doing the right stuff. Talking today about how he's going to institute investigations. He seems to know what's going on. Yeah, we're going to look at the people who started this. We're going to look at what's going on in FISA. We're going to look at the intelligence community. I'm looking at the individuals that were given to me by Devin Nunes for referral. We're going to investigate that. We're going to have the report pretty soon from the Inspector General, but I'm doing my own investigation in addition to that. And then we have this situation where you got people at Homeland Security being taken out. Now, Mitt Romney is very upset about that. And that's a good indication because Mitt Romney is for wide open borders. He is not for controlling the border whatsoever. So if he's freaking out about Stephen Miller being there and getting rid of these people who were undermining President Trump in his own administration, the fifth column being purged out of there, that's a very good sign. And then we look at what happened at the top of the Secret Service. There's a lot of agents inside the Secret Service that are talking to the Daily Mail and saying good riddance to this director, Ailes. They said he proposed saving money by withdrawing protection of Trump's family. And he was more interested in getting chummy with agents rather than fixing a serious problem. And there are serious problems in the Secret Service, as we just saw at Mar-a-Lago. And we've seen this multiple times. But guess where this guy got his job? He was pushed by John Kelly, just like Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, who got axed this week. So it's a very good sign that all these people who are proteges of John Kelly, who said, nobody talks to President Trump but me. I will control what news he sees. He's going to curate the news for him, just like Apple and Google want to, and Twitter and Facebook. They all want to control what you see. Well, John Kelly was doing that to President Trump very effectively. I will control what he sees. I will control who he hears. I will control who he meets with. I will control everything. It's all going to go through me. And he was not on board with President Trump's agenda. And, of course, he pushed his protege. He did nothing at Homeland Security, John Kelly didn't, except perhaps gaslight President Trump about what could and could not be done. Well, we just can't get that done. It's such a big bureaucracy. And you got to understand we got ways that we do things here. And we got a massive amount of inertia here. And you just got to be patient with us, President Trump. We're on board with what you want to do, but we'll get it done eventually. No, he was undermining him. Then when he left and became chief of staff and exercised more control over President Trump, unfortunately, President Trump is very impressed with uniforms and with military bearing. That's probably what happened with that. But he puts Nielsen in his place. He was the one who got Tex, Randolph Tex Ailes, there as charge of the Secret Service. He says, he said, I'm going to quit as Department of Homeland Secretary if you don't put Tex in charge of the Secret Service. The Secret Service personnel saying, good riddance to all of those Kelly people. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. As I said, we've got some very good news. We've got all these people that were cronies of John Kelly. John Kelly left, and now President Trump is purging the excrement that he left behind in terms of Nielsen, in terms of this guy that Kelly demanded be put in charge of the Secret Service. You saw how ineffective he's been. Agents inside the organization said, yeah, he was pushing to remove Secret Service protection from the Trump family in addition. Oh, we'll save some money here. Well, how about you save some lives? And they've slow-walked this investigation from this individual who, as President Trump was taking office, had been for several months saying, this guy's a monster. I won't take a bullet for him. I won't protect him, but still in the Secret Service. And so you got Stephen Miller getting rid of this guy, and you've got a lot of people in the on the immigration side that are being purged out. That's looking very hopeful. Hopefully that's going to work out well. It's always hard to tell. You got to wait and see what the people do. I really am surprised at what Attorney General Barr is doing. So far, he's looking very good. And we'll see if that continues. Now, at the border, As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, you have yet another judge blocking President Trump's policy that would force asylum seekers to wait in Mexico. The judge said they are already fleeing dangerous conditions in their home. Remember, as President Trump correctly pointed out, the absurdity of most of these, they're not political refugees. They are coming for economic advantage. President Trump said, why, if they are political refugees, if they're fleeing persecution in their home countries, why are they waving their flag and burning the American flag as they're coming in mass, defying our laws, defying our borders? Why is that happening? And then as this judge comes out and says, you can't send them back to the Mexican border towns, they would face undue risk to their lives and freedom. And so President Trump tweeted out, a Ninth Circuit judge has just ruled that Mexico is too dangerous for the migrants. So let's bring them into the U.S. And of course, the people that are making it dangerous in Mexico for the migrants also have no impediment to being able to come across the border and harm those people over here. I mean, they're no safer on our side of the border. They're just in our legal system because the drug cartels can go back and forth at will. I just showed you on Monday footage that Craig Sawyer, former Navy SEAL, we've had him on many times, he looks at human trafficking and other issues. In this particular case, he was looking at drug trafficking. He's got hidden cameras on his property. These people are crossing en masse. You see a line of guys, giant packs on their back with drugs, but then also some people that he called rip crews, heavily armed, sawed-off shotguns, ammunition belts. These are bad hombres, and they are there to execute the other drug cartel guys as they see them. And they'll kill anybody that gets in their way. Doesn't matter. You can be a rancher, American rancher, farmer. You can be an American Hispanic who lives on this side of the border. You can be somebody who is crossing the border illegally. They don't care. They'll kill you just as quickly as they'll kill the other people. Yeah, this is so bad. Even putting somebody just on our side of the border, that does not make them safe. And we need to explain that to the American people, not just to this judge, because this judge doesn't care. He's political. He's not ignorant. He's criminal. I've talked many times about the El Salvadoran father who said, I brought my family in. He did it illegally. Brought my family in from El Salvador because I wanted to escape MS-13. And they have so many MS-13 in the schools there in Long Island where my wife grew up. They're seeing Hispanic kids killed there all the time. He said, I thought we got away from that. Well, you can't get away from it if there's no control at the border. And if they can kill the El Salvadoran child in Long Island, MS-13 can, guess what, Judge? They are not safe if they're just over this imaginary line either. So if they're on a border town on the Texas side, they're not safe, any safer than they would be on the border, on the Mexican side, right there at the border. Because they're not safe in Long Island. MS-13, these drug cartels have free run of our country now. Thanks to the Democrats, thanks to these activist judges. President Trump needs to understand that the real danger to this country are these judges and the idea that they are somehow superior to the presidency. No, President Trump, we have a system of government that are checks and balances. You are the executive branch, which is you by yourself, actually have more power according to the founders who wrote the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton and others said the judiciary is the least threatening. They all viewed the central government as a threat. That's why they divided power between the central government and the people and the states. And then they further subdivided the federal government into three branches of the executive, the legislative, and finally the judicial. And they said the judicial branch is the least dangerous because they don't have any way to enforce their mechanisms, their orders, their opinions. And Andrew Jackson, when the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can rip the Cherokee out of their homeland in Tennessee and North Carolina, and you can transport them to Oklahoma. He started doing it. They saw the consequences, and within 1 year, they reversed themselves. They said, this looks horrific. We don't like that. But Andrew Jackson wanted to do it anyway. And he was wrong to do it, But he was right that he had the authority to do it under the Constitution. He said, well, the Supreme Court's made their decision. They've had two decisions in 1 year, each of them opposite of each other. But he said, they've made their decision. Let's see them enforce it. And he continued to do what he wanted to do. We've had President Obama, as we've had multiple decisions just within the Obamacare situation. Multiple situations where Obama was challenged in a lawsuit, or he lost in a lawsuit. And they appealed it. And he said, all right, we're appealing it. And while it's under appeal, I'm going to continue to do what I want to do. And yet President Trump, as soon as a judge says something, he doesn't say, well, I'm going to appeal it. I'm going to continue to do what I want to do. He immediately stops. Pending appeal. So the default position from President Trump has been and still is whatever any federal judge anywhere tells him to do, he will immediately do that. They say jump, he asks how high. And that is the most important thing that is happening here that is endangering us. We just had the State Department bar 16 Saudis from entering the U.S. because of the Khashoggi murder. This is not being widely reported. I wonder if they're not reporting this because it doesn't fit their narrative at the Washington Post and other places. Do you think? Are they going to call this a Muslim ban? Yeah, 16 Saudis cannot come in because we think they participated in the murder of Khashoggi. Just like 5 Muslim-majority countries out of the 50 Muslim-majority countries can't come in. We're going to enact controls against that, and they call that a Muslim ban. 10% of the Muslim, the other 90%, there were no restrictions on it. And that 10%, those were countries that Obama had gone to war with. And also, as part of that quote-unquote Muslim ban was North Korea and Venezuela. Oh, those Muslim countries, right? So, yeah, they're not going to call the ban of the 16 Saudis a Muslim ban, evidently. But we have the chief of Border Patrol in the Rio Grande area talking about how many people are coming across the border. Let's play that clip.
To put things into perspective, last year agents in RGV made 162,000 apprehensions. We're already at 147,000. At this pace, in my sector alone, we will have more than 260,000 apprehensions by the end of the fiscal year. On average, we apprehend more than 1,000 people illegally crossing the border every day. That's roughly the capacity of 17 commercial buses. Wow. Last week, agents in my sector apprehended 1,766 people in a single 24-hour period. We expect these numbers to continue to climb as we enter the summer months, which will undoubtedly place both migrants and our Border Patrol agents at significant risk. Rescue missions will increase as a result, drawing additional personnel from our frontline law enforcement mission.
Okay, you heard him there, and that's just the people that they catch. They don't really know how many people are going. That's kind of the tip of the iceberg. They use that to try to measure how big the iceberg is, but they don't really know. And it's 4 times at least. Welcome back. We're going to take a look at the gun control issue and how that is being pushed. And, of course, we now have a Democrat presidential candidate that has made that his central issue. And, of course, that is the Democrat from California, Eric Swalwell, the guy who's been pushing a civil war in order to do gun confiscation. He's now saying we got to do exactly what Australia and New Zealand have done. And we're going to take a look at the response of gang members in New Zealand. How they responded to that ban. I think it's kind of telling what's coming with that. Plus, we've also got some news. We've got a judge, a federal judge, saying that girls have no right to visual bodily privacy in bathrooms, in showers, and locker rooms. This is a lawsuit that has been brought on behalf of young girls who are being victimized by the Obama administration's transgender policies because, the rights of one mentally ill person trumps that of your daughters, according to Obama and according to the federal courts. And this guy has the audacity to say, so far, the right not to be seen unclothed by the opposite sex is not on the Supreme Court's list. Let me remind you, Judge, of the 9th and 10th Amendment, that just because we have not enumerated our rights doesn't mean that we don't retain them, and we ought to take these things back. It begins with the TSA and it ends with this kind of crap. Is that enough? Is that enough for us? You let them put their hands on your kids so you have the right to travel all the time? And now you're going to let them, put people in that claim that they're the opposite sex, but they're not. I mean, that's the whole thing that bothers me so much, that this contradictory notion that we're being sold by booty gay. What an appropriate name for him. This gay booty candidate is out there telling us that he was created this way. And yet he's making that speech before the LGBT people who are telling us, the T's are telling us, no, there's nothing biological at all about this. It's all in my mind. Whatever I perceive myself to be, that is what I am. Cogito, ergo sex. And I think, therefore, I am the other, whatever sex I believe I am. And so they better get their stories straight, because we're seeing through their lies, their contradictory lies. But let's first take a look, as we're moving through the border policy issues, the out-of-control border. And I am hopeful that things are going to turn around now with the personnel changes that we've seen with Stephen Miller, but they better hurry up. Because as you just heard before we went to break, just in the Rio Grande Valley, the Border Patrol chief there said that the number of people that they've apprehended is more than they've had all of last year. So it's 4 times as many. We've just completed the first quarter of this year. So they're already 4 times what they typically apprehend, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. President Trump has to understand that we have a military to defend this country. That is the stated purpose of the military. Not to run a foreign empire where we become the unpaid mercenaries of NATO and the UN. Of course, that was the policy that Panetta always bragged about. But if we're really going to defend this country, we have a record military budget, and President Trump could repurpose that. As I've said before, if they could in the past, and they have in the past, I said, well, we're going to take the family units. We're not going to separate them. We're going to take all the family unit, and we're going to put them at a military base, and we'll build housing for that and so forth. Well, if you can do that, then you can take the military, instead of bringing the people into a military base, get the people out of the military base and have them patrolling the border. Have them set up immediately temporary fences. They could build a dozen military bases in Syria without even informing the American people or getting authorization from the Congress. They could build a dozen military bases and 4 airfields and put thousands of troops there. But we can't put anybody at the border, we're told. What a bunch of nonsense. President Trump is good about calling BS, except on this issue. And he lets these people get away with this nonsense. And we look at some of the solutions that are being sold, all this stuff, everybody freaking out about, even about the avocados and the cars and so forth, and the double secret probation. You do this for another year, and we're gonna do something about it, says President Trump to Mexico. Well, let's not wait a year. We can't wait a year. Everybody is saying it's an emergency. Even Jay Johnson is saying it's an emergency. Jay Johnson, the former Department of Homeland Security head. If you take a look at this picture of him in the Breitbart article, Donald Trump says cages for the child migrants were actually built by President Obama's administration. And he shows Jay Johnson walking past the cages. And we all know that happened. But, of course, it wasn't a problem until President Trump did it. Then he was separating children from their families at the border. It wasn't Obama, even though he did it. Never accuse Obama of that. And the Democrats continue to turn a blind eye to children who are actually separated from their parents, as I've interviewed one person after the other on this show. And most of them poor and minority, and they're victimized by CPS, Child Protective Systems, who don't give parents any due process. They just take the kids, and then the parents have to fight, in most cases for years, as their kids are put in a very abusive system run by CPS, for profit. And the Democrats don't care about that because that's Americans. They're done with us. They're bringing in voters. And, of course, the Republicans are freaking out because this is going to affect their money, their pocketbook. Oh, well, we're going to have any avocados. As I pointed out, that's a Republican concern. Democrats don't care, except, the foreign citizens who are coming in. They're the reason that we have to import avocados because of the demand of foreigners who've moved in. We produce quite a few avocados here, but it's not enough to keep up with all the people that we import who want avocados and guacamole. That's why I said, for the Republicans, what we need to do is to say, well, we're going to close the border. You're not going to be able to get your avocados. Maybe you ought to think about going back home. If you really want that guacamole, go back to where you can get it on the other side of the border. We could use that as an incentive for people to return south of the border, down Mexico way, because that's where these policies are coming from. So we'll take a look. There's an article on Breitbart. Jessica Vaughn, who is from the Center for Immigration Studies, had a list of 7 steps that President Trump can take to solve the border crisis. And again, I like the people at the Center for Immigration Studies. However, I think they're kind of off the mark on a lot of these things. They're getting close, but they're not quite there. For example, they understand, number one, remittances. There's billions of dollars that are sent annually to Mexico and other countries from aliens who are working illegally in the country. So stop that. Okay, fine. Fine, stop that. But understand that the illegal aliens who are working here aren't as big of a problem as the illegal aliens who are not working here, but who are on our welfare system. And we're giving them remittances in this country. So you're going to ignore that? As I said before, if we're going to have conservative organizations, if we're going to have a free country, someday we're going to have to get rid of this welfare system. Let's start by stopping the welfare system for foreign citizens. Can't you even get behind that, even conservative organizations? Evidently not. We'll be right back. Welcome back. There's an article on Breitbart from an interview that they did with Jessica Vaughn. She is Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. And as I was looking at these 7 reasons, the title of the article is Jessica Vaughn, 7 Steps that Trump Can Take to Solve the Border Crisis. I agree that all of them would be helpful, but none of them go far enough. And they kind of missed the mark. Like I was saying, the number 1 policy she's got here of the 7 is to take on remittances. Talking about the people who are working here, who are here illegally, working here and sending money back to Mexico. She said, stop that. Well, I say it's even more important to stop incentivizing people to come here and not work and get remittances from the welfare state in America. Let's stop welfare for foreign citizens. Let's take a look at the next one here. Force Mexico to sign a safe third country agreement. And here again is another one of these ideas that we have to depend on Mexico and El Salvador and Honduras and all these people to protect our vital interests. We don't do that with defense. We don't say, let's force Germany to protect us from Russia. We never did that with NATO or France. We would never say that with France. But, we don't depend on foreign countries to defend us militarily, do we? So why are we depending on foreign countries and the Democrats to defend our borders? They're not going to do it. News flash after 2 years. Of course, we all knew this going in, that Mexico was not going to defend our borders. None of these countries are. We are defending them from instability because they are unwilling or unable to pay for their own citizens' education or welfare, or to have an economy because they have such a corrupt government or a socialist government or whatever. So we are their pressure relief valve. They're not going to do anything to close that and increase pressure in their country. They are not going to help us. Newsflash, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And it is a vital existential issue. It is far more important to protect our borders than it is to get involved in any of these foreign wars of regime change. Forget about Venezuela and sending troops down there. Send troops to our border to protect America, President Trump. Stop the nonsense with Syria. We just had more people die in Afghanistan. Libya is collapsing again after all of our intervention there. We don't know what we're doing in foreign countries. Do we even have the understanding and the will to protect America? Perhaps not. Perhaps not. Perhaps the Defense Department should get its old name back, the Department of War. We should call it the Department of Foreign Wars, because we cannot use the Defense Department to defend America. That's what we're constantly told. And so then that brings us to number 3. The Center for Immigration Studies policy official says that we got to hire officials who are unafraid of the left-wing media. Well, I think we've got to hire officials who are unafraid of left-wing judges, even more importantly, because they're the ones shutting it down. Yes, President Trump is intimidated by the New York Times and Washington Post and what they have to say. As Breitbart said in October 2018, this person interviewing Jessica Vaughn said, the president's going to have to do what's necessary and not worry about what the New York Times thinks. Well, here's another news flash. The president's going to have to do what's necessary and not worry about what Nancy Pelosi thinks. The president's going to have to do what's necessary and not have to say, well, we got to get the Democrats to help me on this. No, you don't. You have authority as president, and you had authority as president day one. Some of this you signed away for Nancy Pelosi. You gave veto power to local communities if they don't want the wall going through there. You signed away the ability to hold people that are coming in detention centers until you could vet that the kids are even theirs. You signed that away with Nancy Pelosi. But President Trump, you've also got to not be afraid of a single federal judge and let them veto any and every policy that you have to protect this country. So you have to not be afraid of the media, but more importantly, not afraid of the judges and not afraid to refer to your power under the Constitution to protect this country and not afraid to use the military to defend America. What an idea. Number 4, she said, make E-Verify mandatory for employers. I totally disagree with E-Verify. Totally disagree with this. I totally reject the idea that I have to be vetted by the federal government if I want to have a job. I reject the idea that work in America is a privilege, and they're not just going to be doing E-Verify for people that they think are foreign citizens. They're going to be doing it for Americans. And if somebody is willing to violate the law to come into this country, if somebody wants cheap labor badly enough that they will hire people who are here illegally, do you think that they're going to find a way around the E-Verify system? That E-Verify system is just going to be for you. The mark of the beast for you, American citizens. This is nothing but an exchange of our liberty, turning our ability to work from a right to a privilege and doing it so they can protect employers. Because if they were to say to employers, if you hire illegal, this is currently the law. And we have raids from time to time where you see employers whose business model is to get cheap foreign labor that are here illegally, because they can also blackmail these people. They can say, well, you're going to work for this amount of money or we'll turn you in. We're going to pay you less than we pay Americans. We don't have to pay all the taxes that we pay for Americans. We don't have to do these other work safety operations. And if you complain about anything, you're gone because you're not here illegally. So they can blackmail these people. Now, we should be shutting employers like that down. We should have a situation where if people have concern about that, if the immigration control people have a concern about that, the employer has to defend these people. They know that they're American citizens. But you're making this, instead of punishing criminal behavior, you are punishing, when you put out the E-Verify system, you're punishing people who are innocent. You have to prove that you're innocent to get a job. You have to take the right of work away from us and turn it into a privilege. Why? So they can protect the employers, because the employers can say, well, I turned the number into the system and I don't have any liability anymore. Number 5, stop issuing work permits to migrants who have pending asylum applications. Okay, well, again, it's focusing on the work side, always punishing the people who are here working. And I don't have as much of a problem with the people who are here working as I do with the people here on welfare. So stop giving permits for food stamps to people from foreign countries who come here. Stop giving college tuition breaks. You know, if you come here from a foreign country, you can get in-state college tuition at any state. But an American can only get in-state college tuition at the state that they actually have lived in. Stop those kind of advantages. Again, the welfare system. Focus on that. Why have we got conservatives who are so blind to this massive welfare system that we've opened up for the entire world? We can't afford a welfare system like we have created here as part of the New Deal. The old New Deal, The Red New Deal, now we got the Green New Deal. Well, the original communist New Deal that FDR gave us, the red one, that's going to bankrupt us. It is bankrupting us. Slowly, but now, gradually at first and now rapidly, along with our uncontrolled warfare state. So let's stop the welfare state. Let's use the military to protect the border. Let's stop welfare for the entire world. We can't afford welfare at the levels we got it for American citizens, let alone the entire world. And now the Democrats want to ramp up the medical system. And of course, if you come in, you're going to be on the welfare system as well. Number 7, she says, start removing illegal aliens. Hey, why don't you stop deferring law enforcement? Stop the DACA executive order from the previous Department of Homeland Security. That's what President Trump really needs to do. He needs to stop that Obama-era executive order. That is the great error of President Trump, I think. And finally, she doesn't even have this here. If you let the census count people who are here illegally, who are foreign citizens, that's going to give more representation, more political power in Congress and the Electoral College, and more money to sanctuary states. And we're done. We'll be right back. Stay with us. That's right, folks. There's nowhere to run to. There's nowhere to hide. There's no place on earth that has more respect for freedom. But we're losing that respect for freedom. It's under attack. We've got Eric Swalwell coming after the Second Amendment. And, of course, we've got a lot of people who have been coming after the First Amendment. We've had a plan, as Matt Drudge came to InfoWars back in the fall of 2015 and said, hey, they've got a plan to take you guys out. Well, they're still following down that plan. You are the opposition to that plan. You are our sponsorship. We have to outlast their censorship. Ronald Reagan talked about how we were going to outlast and we were going to transcend the communists and their Iron Curtain. We've got to outlast and transcend the Iron Curtain that's been erected against free speech. It's very important, and you are an important part of that, always have been. And as a part of that fight, we had a big discount sale we put on our website that funds this operation, everything that we do here, InfoWarsStore.com. Last week, we did 50 hours of broadcast to support the First Amendment, and we put 50% discount and more now on our most popular products. Everything is at least 50% off. Some of the items are 55 and 60% off. We have free shipping store-wide in addition to that massive discount, and we have double the Patriot points. You can now get 10% off future purchases as part of this sale. We've got some items like Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine, the original formulation. We have that back in stock, and that is 55% off. We got 60% off Brain Force and DNA Force, and Bod Ease, our all-natural anti-inflammatory product. Knockout, our all-natural sleep aid. Those are 60% off. Take a look at the products we have at InfoWarsStore.com. Folks, you are our sponsor. And we're going to find a way out of this. I was just talking earlier about PewDiePie. He is the biggest live streamer on YouTube. He's got 94 million YouTube subscribers, but they're acting like they're going to pull him down. They've done a lot of things to him, so he's acting proactively. And beginning Sunday, he's going to be streaming on D Live. So he's switching platforms off of YouTube. And there's 3 reasons to do this. Number 1, they have a better reward system. They're not as greedy as Google. Google and YouTube take more than 50% of any ad revenue from creators. Instead, they have a system where they take a less of a cut, and they also give it to you in cryptocurrency. And then there's also decentralized ownership of the platform. In other words, they can't, because this is it's not going to be one group of people sitting there curating content, or even one location where you've got somebody who wants to keep free speech alive, but you've got some thugs coming in from the communist government or thugs coming in from Washington, D.C. and shutting them down. This is decentralized. And then finally, of course, there's not going to be any platform cuts. So a difference in the reward system, decentralized ownership of the platform and also the video content, and then no platform cuts. Right now, they've got 3 million monthly active users. So it's a big difference for him. He's going from a situation where he has 94 million subscribers to a platform that has 3 million total. But we're going to have to build these systems. The system that is currently in place has been taken over by these corrupt partners, this fascist system. And we need to understand what that is. And if the government isn't going to do anything about this. And already, again, the foundation is already laid there for the Trump administration to do something about this. I've talked to Robert Barnes, one of our lawyers, First Amendment lawyers, and he's already had cases where he went in. I think it was Facebook, he said. You can see the interview. It's been a couple of weeks since I had the interview with Robert Barnes when I was hosting Alex's show. It wasn't the one I just had with him last week. But he said, yeah, in one of these particular cases, he brought up the Supreme Court case, 1946, Marsh versus Alabama. It was a company town, and that has now become the corporate model for internet control, the company town. And the government has worked with these big companies to create a company town model. And in 1946, the coal company, go back to Tennessee Ernie Ford, you load 16 tons, and what do you get? No free speech and deeper in debt. And so you had a woman who was handing out religious tracts that said, no, you can't do that. We own the town. Can't do that in public square. Well, she fought him all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, even if the public square is privately owned, they can't shut down free speech. That's it. We're done. We've had Dorsey and we've had people from the other platforms, Facebook and Google, say, yeah, our corporate model is the public square, the town square. So they've already said that's their model. We should be done at this point. But the Trump administration is not doing anything about that. So we're going to have to come up with other alternatives to do this. So they really should. It should no longer be no more allowed to allow a big corporation to steal your fundamental rights of free speech than it should be allowed for them to steal your money or to steal your home or to steal your car. It's still theft. That's my property. All right, let's talk about the other moves to take our individual rights. And this is coming from Eric Swalwell. He said the U.S. needs Australian and New Zealand-style gun control. Oh, yeah. Yeah. During an April 8th Esquire interview, Eric Swalwell made clear his belief that the U.S. should follow Australia and New Zealand's lead on confiscatory gun controls, reports Breitbart. He said, do what Australia did. Do what New Zealand did. They've shown us, Australia in the 90s, New Zealand just this week, that courage and doing the right thing can protect people. So he's calling for a ban of semi-automatic weapons. He said, last year I wrote a bill calling for a buyback and a ban on assault weapons, and not just to ban future manufacturing, but to take away the 15 million that are already out there. And again, he got into an argument with Joe Biggs and others who said, yeah, you try to take our guns, you're going to kick off a civil war. And he goes, well, we got nuclear weapons and we got a military and we'll use that against you. Oh, I was just kidding. Yeah, and then he has the audacity to criticize President Trump, saying that's irresponsible, things he says on Twitter. I think what he said is irresponsible. And it's a bunch of nonsense, too, because, in New Zealand, it's not just the semi-automatic. It's never going to be just one type of gun. That ban there also covers pump shotguns. The legislation in New Zealand bans pump-action shotguns that are capable of being used with a detachable magazine. Pump shotguns with a fixed tubular magazine capable of holding more than 5 rounds are banned as well. And the bill gives law-abiding, that's the key, law-abiding owners will have to turn everything in by September the 30th. But what about the gang members? Well, you got the New Zealand gang leaders saying, we're not giving up our guns. They're essentially saying, come and take it. Yeah, and that's what we're going to say to Eric Swalwell. You better swallow pretty hard, Eric, because we're not going to let you take our guns. But this is the leader of a group called the Mongrel Mob, and his name is Sonny Fatu, making it clear his gang will not be surrendering their guns as mandated by the New Zealand government. So the law-abiding citizens may do it, but the gun members won't. That's where have I heard that slogan before? You take away the guns, only the criminals will have guns, right? He said, will gangs get rid of their weapons? He said, no, because of who we are, we can't guarantee our own safety. Well, guess what? It's not just the gang members who can't guarantee their own safety. It's also the law-abiding owners of guns who can't guarantee their safety if they don't have the weapons to defend themselves. The law enforcement officers can't be everywhere all the time, and they can't guarantee your safety. And we've had honest law enforcement officers like Sheriff David Clark say that. I can't be everywhere. Get a gun, train on it, learn how to use it responsibly. Call us. We'll be there as soon as we can, and we'll catch these guys. But until we get there, you're on your own. You got to protect yourself. And that's essentially what the gang members say. Another gang member, Black Power member Dennis O'Reilly, echoed Fatu's sentiment, reports Breitbart. He says, of course not. Of course we're not going to turn out our guns. Why the hell would you be talking about handing back guns when you're talking about progressing your family and moving from pathology to potential? Where on earth would discussions about guns come up in that? Well, we got state senates here in the United States that represent we the people. In Missouri and in Texas, you have legislative bills that have been passed that promise that they're going to disobey all federal gun control efforts that seek to infringe on our right to protect ourselves. Good for them. Missouri, as Free Thought Project points out, may have just made the most monumental step towards freedom and individual liberty since the signing of the Bill of Rights in a 23-10 vote, and this was the end of March. The Senate passed a bill that would nullify all federal gun laws and regulations. They said all federal acts, laws, executive orders, administrative orders, court orders, rules, regulations, whether past, present, or future, which infringe on the people's rights to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment, shall be specifically rejected by the state, and it shall be considered null and void and of no effect in the state. And the same thing has been introduced in Texas. Come and Take It has a picture of a cannon on there. Think about that, Eric Swalwell. It's legit, as you like to say. That's it for the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Flawless victory.